The allure of Viking legends has captivated audiences for centuries, portraying a world where intrepid seafarers and fierce warriors set sail on vast oceans, confronting foes and conquering lands with unparalleled bravery and skill. These legendary figures, including Floki, Ivar the Boneless, Lagertha, and Rollo, have permeated folklore, sagas, and modern pop culture, shaping our understanding of the Viking Age. But what lies beneath the layers of myth and dramatization? Who were these iconic characters in reality? And how did their true stories compare to the grand tales woven around them? The Viking Age, spanning roughly from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, was a time of exploration, expansion, and conflict for the people of Scandinavia. This era saw the Vikings engage in daring raids across Europe and beyond, but their impact extended far beyond mere conquest. The Vikings established trade routes, settlements, and cultural exchanges that left an indelible mark on the regions they encountered. Among the most famous figures from this period are Floki, Ivar the Boneless, Lagertha, and Rollo. Floki, a lesser-known yet intriguing character, was known for his wisdom and might have served as an advisor to other prominent Viking leaders. Ivar the Boneless, son of Ragnar Lothbrok, was a skilled tactician and a complex figure whose physical disability did not hinder his ambition. Lagertha, often portrayed as a formidable shield maiden and leader, stands out as a symbol of the strong and independent women of the Viking Age. Rollo, brother of Ragnar, played a significant role in the history of both Scandinavia and France, earning titles and land as a result of his exploits. As we delve into the lives and legacies of these individuals, it is essential to distinguish between the romanticized accounts found in sagas and the historical evidence that provides a clearer picture of their actions and contributions. The sagas, while rich in narrative and detail, often blur the lines between fact and fiction, embellishing stories for dramatic effect. Yet, they serve as valuable sources that reflect the values, beliefs, and traditions of the time. The true stories of Floki, Ivar, Lagertha, and Rollo reveal not only their personal achievements and struggles, but also offer insights into the broader cultural, political, and social dynamics of the Viking Age. By examining their lives, we can better understand the complexities of this era and appreciate the enduring legacy of the Vikings, whose influence can still be felt in the modern world. We will explore the historical context and individual journeys of these legendary figures, separating fact from fiction and uncovering the reality behind the myths. His birth name was Ivar Ragnarsson, and he was the son of the mythical king Ragnar Lothbrok and the prophet Aslaug. Ivar the Boneless died without a bone. Ivar was born in the 9th century, and it was predetermined that he would leave his own mark on the history of Scandinavia, one that would be distinct from the heritage of his illustrious forebears. In spite of the fact that he inherited a legacy, Ivar had to contend with a number of obstacles right from the beginning, and put in a lot of effort in order to establish his own reputation. Ivar's nickname, Ivar the Boneless, has been the subject of much wonder and discussion over the course of several centuries. Due to the fact that the Vikings were infamous for giving ironic nicknames, historical sources offer only limited explanations for this appellation, which may have been ironic. He may have been particularly huge, with strong bones, or he may have had double joints, according to certain theories. Both of these possibilities are possible. According to Ragnar's tale, The most conventional explanation is that he may have suffered from a disorder known as osteogenesis imperfecta, which causes bones to be fragile. This is the most plausible explanation for his condition. According to the legend, Ivar was unable to walk and had to be carried around everywhere he went. It was because of his reputation for being brutal to Christians in Britain that he was given the Latin term hated, which reflected his notoriety in the region. The initial important obstacle that Ivar encountered in his life occurred when he was still a small lad. Because of his military adventures, his father Ragnar was confronted by a large number of adversaries. Ivar, who was only 7 years old at the time, joined his father in the battlefield as a result of a fight with the Jewish people and the Scanian people. During the battle, Ivar displayed the strength and ability of a much more experienced fighter, displaying his potential to become a future leader. Ivar's early experiences included campaigns in York, where he and his father fought against King Ella's men for 3 days, ultimately emerging triumphant. Ivar's father was also participating in these campaigns. Additionally, the two travelling companions went to Ireland, where they laid siege to Dublin and amassed a significant amount of cash. Ivar was able to gain first-hand understanding of strategic warfare and the reality of leadership as a result of these experiences. In the event that King Ragnar was taken captive and executed by King Ella of Northumbria, a tragic event occurred. Ivar's thirst for vengeance eventually became the primary motivating factor in his life. Having made up his mind to exact revenge for the death of his father, Ivar confronted King Ella using his wits and his ability to think strategically. His appeal for peace was granted by Ella, who also granted him a tiny plot of land in exchange for his request. Ivar's genuine aims, on the other hand, were much more ambitious. Using the area as a base, he was able to amass strength and build up his soldiers without facing any opposition. Ivar's long-term approach ended up being successful when he encircled York and claimed it as his own territory. He was able to get a strategic advantage in his pursuit of dominance by way of this facility that was located on the mainland. The knowledge and careful preparation that Ivar possessed were two of the most important factors that contributed to his success and set him apart from other Viking leaders of the period. Together with his strong brothers, he was able to create a formidable army that came to be known as the Great Heathen Army. His strategic brilliance and tactical prowess were critical factors in this accomplishment. Ivar and his brothers, along with other Vikings, came together to establish this coalition of forces in order to exact revenge for the death of their father. The invasions that they carried out, in particular in the regions of Northumbria and East Anglia, had a significant influence on the history of England and the surrounding area. An invasion of Northumbria was the first major campaign that the Great Heathen Army engaged in. The initial assault on York was carried out by the army under the command of Ivar in order to elicit a response from King Ella, the monarch who was guilty for Ragnar's death. He utilized a staged withdrawal to lure King Ella's army into a trap, which allowed the Vikings to encircle and conclusively beat them. Ivar's strategic intellect came into play when he adopted this tactic. The fact that King Ella was taken captive during this conflict made it a very important conflict. The brothers exacted their vengeance by putting King Ella through a gruesome and ritualistic execution that was known as the Blood Eagle. This was done after they had successfully captured him. Within the context of this execution, King Ella's back was carved open, his ribs were broken, and his lungs were removed in order to form a shape that resembled wings. This deed served not only as a means of retribution against King Ella for the murder of their father, but it also functioned as a symbolic demonstration of their tenacity and will. After King Ella had passed away, Ivar and his brothers celebrated their victory and shared their stories of glory with one another. A puppet monarch under the name of Egbert was placed in Northumbria, with the purpose of acting as a tax collector and channeling money for additional offensive operations. Ivar's intelligence and long-term vision for maintaining their military campaigns were on display through this strategic move which he performed. Following this, the great heathen army moved its attention to Mercia and established winter quarters at Nottingham while doing so. As a result of this migration, the heartlands of Mercia became vulnerable to a severe threat. In response, King Burgred of Mercia requested assistance from King Ethelred of Wessex and his brother Alfred, who would later be known as Alfred the Great. Both of these individuals were able to provide assistance. Ivar's army was confronted by the combined forces of Mercia and Wessex, which resulted in a dangerous standoff. After coming to the conclusion that he was outnumbered, Ivar signed a peace deal that came to be known as the Deal of Nottingham. Through this diplomatic gambit, he displayed his capacity to adjust to changing circumstances and effectively safeguard his position. It was possible for Ivar to reorganize and strengthen his power thanks to the treaty. After establishing a strong presence in Mercia, Ivar shifted his focus to East Anglia. Soon after, he launched an invasion of the province, during which he slaughtered its inhabitants and demanded obedience from King Edmund of East Anglia. King Edmund steadfastly defended his beliefs in spite of Ivar's threats, and he refused to comply with his demands. The fight reached its climax in the crucial battle that took place close to Thetford. In this encounter, Ivar's men completely destroy Edmund's army. As a consequence of his refusal to renounce his Christian religion, King Edmund was eventually taken captive, subjected to beatings and torture, and ultimately put to death. At the same time as Edmund continued to pray to Christ, the heathen brought the holy man to his doom and, with a single blow, severed his head. Ivar desired to put King Edmund's faith to the test in order to determine whether or not his God would come to the king's rescue. Edwald, also known as Edmund's brother, escaped to Dorset and became a recluse there. It was because of the fear that Ivar had instilled in the nation that he decided to give up his royal bloodline. Ivar was the one who brought an end to the royal dynasty that ruled East Anglia. The king of East Anglia, Edmund, had just been put to death in a ritualistic manner, and he is now referred to as Saint Edmund, the martyr of history, as a result of his refusal to become a puppet king for Ivar, and his refusal to repudiate his god in the face of impending death. His narrative began to become legendary. Ivar's reign of terror was all throughout the world, according to the English chronicler and monk Simeon of Durham, who wrote about it. The use of fire and swords resulted in the destruction of monasteries and cathedrals. When it moved from one location to another, it eventually left behind nothing but walls that were devoid of a roof. Ivar eventually made his way back to York, leaving the Viking force in the hands of his brothers Halfdan and Ubba, who exercised shared command over it. A petition for peace was submitted by the Ivar brothers in the year 870 in England. Ivar, on the other hand, was unable to remain idle, and he consequently went to Scotland and took part in its fight. Olaf the White was a participant in this endeavour beside him. This was a coordinated assault. Ivar would travel in a north-northwesterly direction from York, while Olaf would be sailing up the Clyde with a massive fleet of dragon-headed longships. Dumbarton Rock, which was a fortification of the Britons and the ancient capital of the Strathclyde monarchy, was the location where they first met. Throughout the years, the castle had successfully repelled the assaults of the Picts, the Scots, and the Angles at various points in time. Furthermore, the Annals of Ulster state that Ivar and Olaf laid siege to the citadel for a period of 40 days until the water supply of the fortress was exhausted. From that point on, Ivar would raid the fortress. As soon as the siege was lifted, a large number of prisoners were taken and sent to Dublin, where they were sold into slavery. At the time, Dublin was the most important slave market in Europe. Therefore, the Chronicles of Ulster indicate that this procedure was carried out. Following this, Ivar made his way back to Dublin, where he became renowned as the monarch of the Norsemen of all of Ireland and Britannia. Ivar, who was also the King of Dublin, was a walking legend, just like his father, who was known for being the murderer of kings and the chief inheritor of royal bloodlines. On the other hand, he was never content to merely rule. His need for more, for another empire, and for another adventure was never satisfied. Ivar made his way back to Dublin in the year 871, and he remained there as king of the Northmen of all of Ireland and Britain until the year 873, when he passed away. Despite the fact that the cause of his death is still unknown, many people believe that it was because of his curse. Ivar would begin the process of establishing his dynasty of the Way-Emir, and he would create a legacy and reputation that would endure for 3,000 years. With the help of his group of the vast heathen army, Ivar established a kingdom that included Dublin, the Isle of Man, the Western Isles, Orkney, and significant portions of the northern and western coasts of Scotland. The Ivar dynasty, or descendants of Ivar, would go on to become the most powerful Viking clan in Britain for a period of time. According to the mythology, Ivar's body was carried back to England at his own request, and it was buried near the coast in order to serve as a talisman to prevent further conquests of his countries. The activities of William the Conqueror are detailed in Icelandic sagas from the 13th century. The mound was broken by him when he arrived at the burial location, and he discovered that Ivar's body had not decomposed. In order to dispose of Ivar's body, William arranged for a massive pyre to be constructed. Following the destruction of the warrior's body, William, who was himself a descendant of the Normandy-based Viking chieftain Rollo, went on to conquer the entirety of England, reportedly breaking the curse that Ivar had placed on the domain. It was Ivar the Boneless who was responsible for the destruction of the last Brittonic kingdom in Scotland. This kingdom was composed of ancient people who spoke Celtic and had inhabited Britain since the Iron Age. It was also under his rule that the line of rulers of Northumbria and East Anglia came to an end. The legacy of Ivar continues to be remembered in both history and popular culture. Rollo, the Viking. Jarl is one of the most mysterious and legendary persons in the history of the Vikings. He embodied the complicated interplay of power and fate that was characteristic of his time period, as well as the spirit of adventure and the fiery will of the people. His narrative not only sheds light on the complex system of politics and culture that existed during the medieval period, but it also demonstrates the enduring appeal of Viking lore. Rollo's beginnings can be traced back to the mystery that was shared by many of the Viking leaders. It is thought that he was born in the late 9th century in Scandinavia, an area that is well known for its rough landscapes and seafaring culture. However, the precise location of his birth is still unknown. Because of his years of experience in the maritime industry, he was able to instill fear in the hearts of coastal towns all throughout Europe. Attempts to put together Rollo's pedigree may be found in a number of historical sources and sagas. However, these sources and sagas have different interpretations of what they mean. In the Icelandic sagas, for example, Rollo is said to have originated from Maur, which is a county located in the northern region of Norway. On the other hand, William of Malmesbury, an English historian who lived in the 12th century, places Rollo's pedigree within the aristocratic ranks of Norway. Dudo of St. Quentin, who composed Historia Normannorum at the request of Rollo's grandson, Richard I of Normandy, is the author of the book that provides the most comprehensive account of the Norman conquests. The chronicle written by Dudo offers a comprehensive, albeit somewhat biased depiction of Rollo's life and the heritage he came from. Rollo is a man of formidable physical stature and uncompromising tenacity, at least according to his description of him. Rollo's childhood was plagued by adversity and the loss of loved ones. His brother Gorim was killed in battle, and he fought alongside the King of Dacia, which is a phrase that refers to Denmark and Sweden. He also endured the death of his brother. Because of this defeat, he was forced into exile, and he eventually made his way to England, where he carried out a number of successful raids across a variety of kingdoms. It was because of his enormous stature and power that he was given the nickname the Walker, which reflected his reputation for being a fierce fighter. Rollo's participation in the Great Heathen Army, which was a strong Viking army in England from 865 to 878, is consistent with his competence in the field of combat and his desire to achieve greatness. The fact that he was a member of the army places him in the same category as other well-known Viking leaders. Rollo's involvement in significant historical events is highlighted by the fact that he had a strong relationship with King Guthrum, also known as King Aethelstan, a Christianized Viking who controlled East Anglia. The adoption of Guthrum as a Christian by means of baptism, and his defeat at the hands of Alfred the Great at the Battle of Edington in the year 878, both served to further reinforce Rollo's position within this intricate tale. Following his time spent in England, Rollo shifted his focus to Francia, an area that was riven by internal strife and was ready to be conquered. Because of his skills as a warrior and a leader, he was able to make the most of these possibilities, which contributed to the further establishment of his legacy. Because of this, it would be an ideal target for sacking and conquering. Rollo emerged as a formidable warrior and raider during a period of significant turbulence in Western Europe following the death of Charlemagne in 800–14. Both of these events occurred within the same time period. The growth of the Frankish Empire occurred under the reign of Charlemagne. Yet, after his death, his son, Louis the Pious, fought to preserve control of the empire. Louis's passing resulted in tension within the family, as well as a struggle for authority among his three sons. After some time, the empire was divided into three sections, which would later become the territories of West Francia, Middle Francia, and East Francia. As the Frankish Empire began to fall apart, the Vikings, who were well known for their prowess in sailing and raiding, took advantage of the situation. Approximately about the year 820, a Viking ship made its way up the Seine River in order to raid the beaches of Francia, specifically selecting unprotected monasteries and villages as its targets. Significant damage was done to Rouen as a result of successive Viking assaults. Rollo had developed into a formidable Viking chieftain by the year 885, and he had a large number of troops under his command. As part of the invasion of Paris, he joined Siegfried, also known as the Sea King. At the end of November in the year 885, they laid siege to Paris with tens of thousands of warriors and literally hundreds of ships. Odo, the Count of Paris, was in charge of the defense, and despite the numerous siege engines that the Vikings had, they were unable to break through the city's fortifications. After some time, Emperor Charles the Fat and his army arrived, but rather of engaging in combat, he gave permission for the Vikings to sail up the Seine River. To retire in the spring, he paid them a total of 700 pounds of silver. As a result of this deed, Charles's status in France was damaged, and the situation would become even more unstable. In the course of his ongoing attacks in northern France, Rollo eventually managed to kidnap Poppa, the daughter of Count Berengar, and marry her. They had a son named William Longsword, who would go on to have a significant impact on the history of Normandy for generations to come. Rollo's presence in northern France established the framework for the ultimate name of the region as Normandy, which is derived from the word Northmen. During Rollo's tenure, the political climate in West Francia was fraught with instability, as evidenced by the numerous leadership shifts that occurred. In the year 888, Otto was crowned king, but by the year 898, Charles the Simple had taken the throne. Rollo took advantage of the confusion and accumulated wealth and influence, thereby creating a presence of Vikings in the northern region of France. The fact that Rollo placed a strategic emphasis on the city of Chartres was evidence of his ambition to exert authority over strategic locations in the centre of Francia. Rollo used a combination of siege engines, psychological warfare, and persistent assaults to weaken the city's defences. The city was wealthy and well fortified, but Rollo was able to overcome these advantages. Rollo began a siege of the city of Chartres in the year 911, following a series of raids that took place in the northern region of France. In response to his crimes, Richard, Duke of Burgundy, and Robert I of France engaged him in combat. Both of these individuals were able to bring him to justice. Despite the fact that the French eventually won the upper hand in this conflict, Rollo was able to escape with a small company of his men, which allowed the Norse occupation of Rouen to continue. As a consequence of this, the French tried to negotiate with Rollo in order to put an end to his raids. Rollo was granted land in what would later be known as Normandy, as a consequence of the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte, which was signed by King Charles the Simple. The agreement between Rollo and the Vikings was that Rollo would stop his raids and defend the land against any other Viking assaults. Rollo's life took a huge turn for the better as a result of this deal, which resulted in him becoming the lord of a new domain after having previously been a merciless robber. The fact that Rollo was of Viking descent did not prevent him from embracing his new homeland and assimilating with the Frankish people who lived there. The fact that he and his troops were required to become Christians as part of the terms of his agreement with Charles the Simple was a defining milestone in his metamorphosis. In addition, Rollo married Gisela, Charles's daughter, as a sign of goodwill. This not only strengthened his connection with the Frankish king, but it also legitimized his reign over Normandy. The historian Itzid Dudo of Alvarez of Saint-Quentin, who is responsible for creating the Poirot Montredier, both the Historia Normanorum, tells the hilarious story of Rollo's promise of fealty to Charles as part of the pact when he was writing the document. At first, Rollo was adamantly opposed to kissing the king's foot, stating that he would never submit himself to the authority of any man. Instead, he gave the order to one of his warriors to carry out the act, which resulted in a humorous incident in which the warrior brought the foot of the king to his mouth, which caused the king to fall backwards. Rollo's allegiance to Charles the Simple went beyond the terms of the pact, as he assumed the task of protecting the coast of West Francia's northeastern region and providing support to Charles in the face of internal strife. At the beginning of the year 920, Charles was in danger of being captured and imprisoned, which resulted in a period of talks for his release. Rollo and his forces were forced to return to their coastal base camps upon the conclusion of the Battle of Soissons, which took place in 923. The battle ultimately resulted in Charles's defeat and capture. Over the course of his later years, Rollo was subject to a number of political shifts and a return to destructive campaigns. In violation of the agreements he had made with King Rudolf of Burgundy, he began his invasions by the year 925. The exact year that Rollo passed away is still unknown, with guesses varying from 928 to 932 about the year of his passing. In spite of this, he was laid to rest in the Cathedral of Rouen with Catholic ceremonies, which is a sign of his incorporation into the culture of the area. It is said that Rollo's final hours were marked by a return to his Viking roots, as he supposedly sacrificed numerous people to Odin and handed presents to the church. This is according to the French monk Adhemar de Chaban. Rollo's metamorphosis from a Viking warlord to a Norman nobleman is a complicated process, and this duality of his character mirrors the difficulty of that transformation. Because he established a strong presence in European affairs and established the great dynasty of Normandy, Rollo left behind a legacy that will last for much longer than anyone else. His ancestors, most notably William the Conqueror, were instrumental in determining the path that English history would take in the generations to come. The Norman conquest of England in 1066, which was conducted by William, a direct descendant of Rollo, had a significant influence on the English monarchy, as well as on the culture and language of the English people. The journey that Floki Vilgarason took to Iceland in the 9th century is a story steeped in Viking adventure, discovery, and the harsh reality of surviving in parts of the world that have not been explored before. In addition to his role as a Viking seafarer and maybe a raider during the time of the Great Heathen Army, Floki's legacy is chiefly defined by his ability to navigate and his journey to discover Iceland. His narrative perfectly encapsulates the spirit of Viking travel and the bold endeavour to discover new territories in the northern regions. From the beginning of Floki's journey to Iceland, there was a report that a wanderer named Nadod had discovered a mystical land nearby. Without intending to do so, Nadod had sailed from Norway to the Faroe Islands and made an attempt to establish a settlement there. Nevertheless, while he was travelling back to Norway, he became disoriented and found himself in a snowy and uncharted area. He referred to this land as Sneerland, which is also spelled Snowland. In the year 868 CE, Floki, who was intrigued by this story, embarked on a journey to discover this continent, placing his life and the lives of his crew on the line for the expedition. In order to emphasize the tremendous stakes and commitment involved, Floki's crew consisted of their families, animals, and valuable items from the outside world. For the purpose of navigating over unexplored waters without the assistance of modern instruments, Floki relied on the sun, the stars, and a crystal to show him the way. He also carried 3 ravens with him, which were considered to be crucial in Viking culture because they were considered to be Odin's birds. Due to the fact that one of the ravens did not return after being released, Floki's faith in the divine guidance provided by Odin was enhanced. This was an indication that they were getting closer to land. The crew of Floki arrived in Iceland, a country that is renowned for its breathtaking natural beauty, which includes glaciers, rivers, mountains, and active volcanoes. During the summer months, the explorers constructed a camp on a bay that was abundant in wildlife. They spent their time there fishing and gathering eggs throughout the day. On the other hand, because they were warriors rather than farmers, the gang failed to save hay for their animals, which resulted in difficulties during the harsh winter. Like the realm of ice in Norse mythology, Niflheim, the winters in Iceland were harsh, dark, and cold. They were reminiscent of the winters in Iceland. The group had to endure an insurmountable amount of adversity, which included animals and humans going hungry, and the cold making its way into their bones. The delay in rebuilding their longship made it difficult for Floki to leave Iceland, despite the fact that he made the decision to run away from the country. The delay caused them to spend an additional winter in Iceland, during which time they were able to observe the volcanic activity that was occurring on the land. Floki and his company successfully made it through 2 winters before finally departing from Iceland, which they nicknamed after the frigid circumstances that they saw there. As soon as Floki arrived back on the mainland, he had a bad opinion of Iceland, describing it as a desolate region. However, Herjulf, a member of his crew, realized the potential in Iceland, which was in opposition to Floki's point of view. There was a tiny group of Irish clergymen who had developed a religious community in that location. There is little doubt that they raced away in fear for their life when they saw the Vikings come. They ran so quickly that they left behind some of their books and holy relics with the Vikings. Because of this, Floki is still accepted as the person who discovered Iceland, despite the fact that we do not know the names of the monks who discovered it for the first time. As the course of events would have it, Floki ultimately made his way back to Iceland, accompanied by his wife, son, and several additional daughters. Not only would he establish his home near a river, but he would also establish a community there. The year 868 CE marked the beginning of Floki's voyage, during which he relied on natural elements such as the sun, stars, and a crystal to guide him in the direction of Iceland. In addition, he brought 3 ravens with him as personal advisors, which served as a representation of his link to the Norse god Odin, who is known as the All-Father and the god of wisdom and knowledge. As a result of the 3rd raven flying in a northwesterly direction and not coming back, Floki believed that it was a sign from Odin directing him towards the area that he did not know. These ravens would assist him in determining the direction in which he should travel. Following the discovery of the spectacular beauty of Iceland, which includes its glaciers, active volcanoes, mountains and rivers, Floki and his crew made their home in a bay that was very abundant in species. The land, on the other hand, proved to be difficult, particularly during the harsh and dark winter seasons, when the settlers were confronted with intense cold and a lack of resources. The journey that Floki took and the subsequent colony that he established marked the beginning of Iceland's history, despite the challenges that she faced. The narrative of Floki is intricately connected to the development of Iceland as a significant Viking nation and the founding of new Viking settlements. A population of approximately 25,000 people was estimated to have been fully settled in Iceland by the year 930 CE, which was less than a century after Floki's first discovery of the island. It was in Iceland that the actions of Viking monarchs, battle chiefs, and other key historical events were documented in texts, poems, and songs. Iceland became a centre of Norse culture that was known for its rich history. The story of Lagertha, a well-known female Viking fighter, sheds insight on the role that women played in Viking society, as well as their participation in fights alongside males. This is the case when we move on to the next chapter. An account of Lagertha's life is provided in the book titled The Deeds of the Danes, in which the author highlights her bravery and her ability to perform well in combat. Fro, the King of Sweden, had embarked on an invasion of Norway, during which he insulted the women who were related to Sigurd. At the same time as she joined Ragnar Lothbrok in his quest for vengeance against Fro, she also joined him in his search for vengeance. In response to Ragnar's call to war, Lagertha, along with other women who reacted to the call, fought on the front lines while posing as a man and wearing clothing that was designed for men. She was able to capture the attention and respect of the entire army as a result of her outstanding performance in war. Ragnar himself appreciated the bravery and valor displayed by Lagertha, and he attributed the victory to her strength as the reason for the victory. This would give the impression that she was interested in Ragnar. The faker that Lagertha was. To determine Ragnar's level of determination and strength, Lagertha appointed a dog and a bear to serve as guards at her residence. This allowed her to observe Ragnar's behavior. Once Ragnar arrived at Lagertha's residence, he faced the demons on his own without any assistance. In the sense that he was able to kill the dog with his hands and the bear with his spear, he declared himself to have been successful. From that moment forward, Lagertha, who was awestruck by Ragnar's bravery and ability, lauded him for overcoming the threat, and their connection blossomed as a result of this. After some time had passed, the couple decided to be married and went on to have 3 children, a son named Fridleif, and 2 daughters, whose names have been lost to the annals of literature. Fridleif was the only son. Despite the fact that it took Ragnar 3 years to fall in love with Thora, the daughter of King Herod of Sweden, the couple's marriage was filled with happiness and joy during the entirety of that phase of their relationship. As a consequence of this, Ragnar made the decision to divorce Lagertha and relocate back to Denmark, which represents a very major turning point in the relationship between the two of them. The escape of Ragnar from Lagertha took place at the same time as Denmark was going through a civil war. Harald, a rival leader, was in a position to seize control of the realm while he was away, and the Jutes and the Scanians collaborated in order to make this happen. In the event that Ragnar was confronted with this challenge, he made a plea for assistance from Norway, and Lagertha herself was one of the individuals who came to his rescue. Even though they had become estranged from one another, she brought with her a fleet of 120 ships and a contingent of soldiers to accompany Ragnar in battle. She did this despite the fact that they had become enemies. Her affection for Ragnar nevertheless remained strong. It turned out that the entrance of Lagertha was a defining moment in the conflict that followed at that point. It was said that she possessed a matchless spirit, and she was the one who led her men in a courageous counterattack that ultimately led to Ragnar being victorious in the battle. Her strategic skill and bravery were the driving forces behind Ragnar's army, which ultimately led to the defeat and death of Harald, as well as the withdrawal of his soldiers through the battlefield. The victory that Lagertha achieved solidified her status as a skilled and formidable warrior, and the impact that she had on the history of the Vikings will continue to be felt for many centuries to come. Following the Bordeitolot, starting the conclusion of the fight, Lagertha went back to her original kingdom and executed a shocking act. She assassinated her new husband, therefore claiming his title and governing autonomously. Because she was of the opinion that it was preferable to lead independently rather than to share authority with another individual, she took this step, which exhibited her determination and ambition. The narrative of Lagertha, as it is recorded in the Gesta Danorum, is a testament to her enormous achievements and the unusual position she held as a woman queen during this time period. It is a monument to her immense accomplishments and the exceptional position she maintained. Although her narrative has been recounted and dramatized in current renditions, like as the television show Vikings, there are substantial variations between the production and the historical sources. This is the case despite the fact that her story has been updated and retold. The program, for instance, makes the assumption that Lagertha and Ragnar are the parents of a young child named Bjorn, despite the fact that Fridleif is the only person mentioned in historical records. In spite of the fact that there are no historical records that are reliable regarding Lagertha's existence, it is incontestable that she left behind a legacy as a warrior and a political figure. The Viking people were famed for their toughness, resourcefulness, and perseverance during a moment of turbulence. And her narrative exemplifies these attributes to a perfect degree. Lagertha's contributions to Viking history highlight her as an intriguing and inspiring lady, whose enduring impact on the course of medieval history cannot be overstated. Her contributions to Viking history highlight her historical significance. What do you think about legendary heroes? Please leave your opinion below in the comments section, and don't forget to click the subscribe button to continue exploring ancient history with us. Thank you for your attentive listening. Have a good day.